Okay. So the plan, I think that what we had written down was to go over the homework, debrief experiment, talk about that. And also we also sort of wanted to add in there if there's any comments or reflections from the videos. And then the second thing was to design your own change process using principles, because we imagine somehow principles is a higher intervention place. And we kind of have an idea of sort of doing a cartoonized version of that, sort of exaggerating that. And we'll go through doing that. And then also maybe looking at designing our own change process from looking again at, such that the means would match the ends in the change process. So that's what we kind of had planned today. And there's no like PowerPoint except for just to guide us through it. We'll be collecting what we say on the PowerPoint, but we also really want to say we can throw that out if there's something else we want to do together. Since there's just the three of us, if there's some way that, since I think you said this was your last, you won't be able to come on Wednesday, that if there's some way we could serve you, we could have a completely different conversation. You need to unmute because we can't hear you.
I think your plan is okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about Wednesday. It's maybe I'll say 50%. I'm not really sure. But yeah, I think just carrying on with what you planned is good. I did some of the homework, so that would be good to go over that stuff.
I had demute too. Any reflections on the videos or comments? I rewatched them for probably the 5th or 6th time that I've watched them, and I really I like how clear it is, and I think I'm going to try to use it in my classes somehow. So anyway, Linda did a great job of making them, I think, but I don't know any other reflections on them.
So one reflection was, it's hard to believe that like Aristotle had insights that are still meaningful today. So that was sort of one reflection, like, I guess he was pretty smart, and there's something still meaningful in what he came up with. The other was I was trying to kind of connect that framework to the iceberg model, and like there's some parallelism, but not complete parallelism. And then the other thing was, trying to go through the exercise of kind of using that model. Sometimes I found it difficult to put things into 4 discrete pieces. There's maybe sort of a continuum, from the beginning to the end. So.
Yeah, I had trouble. I often have trouble breaking down using Aristotle's model of causality. I can sometimes the material is very obvious, but then distinguishing the process from the goals and the intent, sometimes that can get really fuzzy for me, to see what exactly is the intent that's driving all the other decisions. But I also have found that it's been super, super helpful as a framework to analyze dynamic. When I've been in a change process working with other people, just listening to how they speak and thinking, oh, their intent is actually somewhere else. When mine is over here and theirs is over here, we're in 2 different domains. That's why we keep, just kind of going sideways. with each other, I have found that's been very useful myself.
I think for me also too, probably more often is if we get to the intent is sometimes the same, but our models are different. Like intent is to serve students, say. That's what we have a positive intent to do that. But our model of doing that, or sort of the final forms, are different. And to be explicit about, like, okay, so how do you think serving students happens? That, you know, to actually inquire into trying to understand their model of it, because to me it just looks crazy. Like, how could you even imagine that serving students? But they actually do have the intent to do that. So mostly I think we do have that common thing we're trying to do.
Yeah, one of our friends and colleagues, his theory is that conflict arises not out of different intent, but like you said, Liz, but out of a different picture in our minds that correlates to the intent that we share. So, you know, if we could kind of look at like a bubble in your head, if we could look at the bubbles in people's heads about what is going to get us to point B, you know, one bubble, my bubble is going to look really different than somebody else's bubble. And so that's what we're arguing about, is that hidden bubble thing, rather than the actual thing that we're allegedly doing together. That when we're trying to change process, it's just these hidden mental models of what we think is going to achieve the thing that we're trying to get to.
One other thing I thought about was with the intent is that, I mean, is that kind of the vision statement or mission statement? Like once in a while with groups, you know, we'll take the time to develop something, and I think it is helpful. In the beginning it seems a little bit hokey, but I think, you know, as months and years go on, it is kind of helpful to have. Is that kind of the ideal, that like your vision statement would fairly accurately reflect the final causality or the intent?
That's a really good question. I think that oftentimes the intent, the final causality, is the answer to the question, for the sake of what? For the sake of what are you doing this? So sometimes people's vision statements can actually be more inside the form, and the mission can be inside the process, the thing they do every day. And the intent is often hidden, for the sake of what they're doing it.
Okay.
But ideally, that's that you align on the intent. You know, for the greater good, for example. Our vision to be to serve the state of California by producing the most competent engineers. And the mission is to be a vibrant learning environment, or something like that. But the intent is often, you know, kind of not, it doesn't even show up in those statements, but it is totally important. So should we debrief? Does it make sense to, I'm still talking, I guess. Does it make sense to debrief our experiments at this point?
Sure.
Okay, I think this experiment that we had for this week, the one that we planned on debriefing, was the one about setting my model. But we could debrief other ones if people conducted other experiments. So I think it was in my model, and then saying whatever you're going to say. And I wonder if you tried that and if you had any insights, or if you try another experiment. How did that go for you, Michelle?
So I didn't make a strong effort on this experiment. There were, some of it was, I didn't have an opportunity to talk to people about many things this, these last few days. And then sometimes maybe it was just self-consciousness. I would sort of say in my model in my head rather than out loud. So I didn't do a whole lot with this one.
Probably because in your model you shouldn't be saying that before you speak. I did it. I tried it aloud with my dog. Like I went home, and I also, since it's summertime, I have very limited interaction with people. And I was talking to my daughter, and I kept saying, in my model, in my model, we should probably, have dinner ready by 5 or something. And then after about 5 minutes, she said, what model are you talking about? And so I too shifted to a strategy of talking to myself and saying it in my head over and over again, like saying, because of course, clearly I talk to myself all the time, and whether or not I'm aware of it, but I found myself in this noticing my unhappiness, saying, in my model I shouldn't feel this way, and in my model my life should be different. And it's just really funny it was funny to me to see how much I was actually creating, I was producing, my model was producing the effect. Like saying in my model, I shouldn't feel this way, it was really the fact that I had that model that caused me to feel that way. I had this discontent. And if I didn't have that, if I had a model of, whatever I feel is what I feel, I don't know, I started to see the link between the model and the outcome. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone.
I too didn't do the homework, so but I have been thinking a lot about models, but not really using them. But really, what I tried to do, I did a different experiment. I just tried to really observe my own thoughts, and what I did see is that I do the same thoughts over and over and over. Like I was reading, I think it was Eckhart Tolle. I think he said something like, mostly we don't have new thoughts, we just say them over and over again, and if we were disciplined about, is this a new thought, then you can go ahead and follow that path. But if it's the same path that you've been following over and over again, maybe try not to have it or something. So, I noticed this weekend how repetitive, it's almost OCD kind of, like, it's almost like, okay, this is the problem. I'm gonna this, and then I don't know, that I start over again. So I don't know. Just watching my own thought process is pretty much the experiment I did. It wasn't in my model experiment. Maybe that's how pathways are developed in our brains that are so hard to break. That. Maybe that's how other people are too. They have a causal pathway that they follow over and over again. And so no wonder it's hard when we suggest there might be a different way. I mean, it's hard for me.
Well, yeah, it sounds like in both experiments, you're raising awareness, so that's, that's helpful. But yeah, no, I completely agree with just having the same thoughts over and over. It's just this repetitive loop, so, and I go through different things where I think, oh, if I just kind of catch myself doing it, I'll kind of break out of it, and then I'll have other times that I'll just think, oh, it's hopeless, just kind of let it go. You know? So.
Yeah.
What's your theory about the loop? About, you said there are times where if I catch myself doing it, I could break out, like you could execute, what is that called, a break in the do loop or something?
Right.
And then what's your theory about why we can't execute a break?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I actually I've thought quite a bit about this, and I think it comes back to some of those underlying structures, mental models, whatever that you've talked about. That you know, like let's say let's say I have this loop about, gosh, I really want to eat that chocolate, or whatever. I could, I could break that thought, but it's going to come back like, gosh, I really want to eat that chocolate. But, perhaps there's some underlying things, gosh, I like eating chocolate if, I'm stressed out about something or, whatever. So I think often, I have to look at what else is going on that might be kind of leading me to have these little obsessive loops or, whatever. So.
I actually plotted my little obsessive loop in the form of a causal loop diagram. I'd like to share it with you.
That's great. Show it. Perfect.
Hold on. Okay, so this is a photo of my little obsessive loop, and let me, I point here. This is essentially, let me see, here's the symptom. I have this something about, like, I think I've made a mistake. If we look at the iceberg, the event or the symptom is, me concluding I made a mistake. I'm not sure this is quite the way it works. And then that leads to this thing where I pick on myself or try to fix myself. And either is through something that I say to myself, like, dang it, you shouldn't do that, or next time, blah, 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 or some kind of mildly self-destructive behavior. And then it goes this way. The arrows. Here, see these arrows? So these arrows kind of go around like this. This is a reinforcing loop, and this one over here is a reinforcing loop. I tried to do the iceberg model, but what I saw was that it was actually interacting. So kind of, because I was thinking, like you said, Michelle, about the thought structure, that there's something invisible, like that molecule of the water that you can't see, that's actually producing the outcome. And I think this is it. I have somewhere inside me this thought structure that says you must be perfect to be acceptable. Like you must, another way of saying that is to be loved, or to feel loved. To be loved, you have to be perfect. That nothing less than that is okay. So that thought structure produces this pattern of behavior. Essentially, I don't feel acceptable as I am, and then I conclude something's wrong with me because of this thought. And then I try also to fix myself, and then I conclude, well, even the act of fixing myself is making a mistake, and so then I'm not acceptable, and then I just keep going around and around. It just keeps, reinforcing one another. It's crazy. It's really crazy making.
Well, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, I think many people have similar loops. I mean, definitely at times I do. So yeah, this is like one of those things that makes life interesting, like how to cope with this brain that we can't completely control, or can't really control at all. So.
But I also think it's, we can at least be a little bit aware of it. It somehow feeds into our own value as a person. So whenever we think about sort of doing things, it also is intimately hooked to our value, like whether we're lovable or whether we're okay on the earth or whether our life is justified or whatever. And so it has a lot of power. And if you just think of like you're in a meeting with 12 people and they all have that, but it's all like below the surface and nobody says it, sort of, nobody wants to fight and say, yes, I am lovable, or pay attention to me. Nobody does that, but they kind of do it in sort of weird ways. So it helps me to kind of understand why we hate meetings, or why we get so triggered by people, and because we have this all going on. We're trying to prove we're okay in the world. It's just amazing. And I think that's one of the things we've maybe a little bit been trying to do is to make that a little bit more visible for the people we're working with, like, and saying, yeah, we should talk about love, and we should talk about the things in our lives that we're obsessing about, and how those causal loops happen. And not that we're trying to fix it, but just sort of shining light on it. I don't know, I think that's in my model. I think that's how change could happen, possibly. I don't know, I could be wrong, though.
Well, I think, of course, usually when I'm in a meeting, I think I'm the only one who has to prove myself. So it is kind of an interesting observation that, all of us in the meeting have our own versions of that going on, maybe in different ways or whatever. We all have that going on.
I think for us, when we started attempting the change process that we have at our institution, we were trying to implement kind of a cross-college curricular innovation, cross-disciplinary, really across the 6 colleges. So when we first started, we just thought, all right, let's just design this thing, and we're going to do it. And our colleague Roger is the one who started asking about, well, if we got all this going on in the background, what's going to happen? What will be the consequences of overlaying first of all, our design that consists of a monolithic set of engineering assumptions. If we just put that on top of this whole human system, what will we end up with? I think that, I think it's hard to avoid a mess no matter what you do. Like, you can decide you will overlay that, you're going to use enough power, money, and force to push through that thing that you want to do. And that will have a kind of mess, probably in the implementation phase, or have a kind of mess. Or you could choose to have the mess up front, really asking and deconstructing a lot of what you see underneath the surface, so that you can design from a different place. And what we have found is that mess that you get from that process, it truly is messy. But I don't know what you would say, Liz, but I'd say that the change process is more satisfying to me, and it's also more lasting in terms of the personal changes that take place that enable the external changes that you're trying to achieve.
When you've worked on some of these change processes, who's been the leader? Like, have you been one of the leaders, or just kind of a participant? Or I mean, I would think to do that kind of process. Well, I guess I think the leader has to want to do that process and also be somewhat maybe gifted in helping others follow a process like that.
I don't know. I'm sure Linda could add to this, but I think that our in the process, it's, if we look at leaders, it's been Linda, Roger, and I. The three of us have sort of been holding, and we kind of think of it as holding the space for the things to manifest. And that is something. It takes a lot to remind ourselves of the principles and the intent, and have call spaces for us to gather and have conversations. And then there's also a lot of just stuff that needs to be done. Like for this learning initiative we are working on, talking to people and scheduling classes and applying for grants and things like that. So there's all that stuff that has to be done. And so sometimes that looks like the leaders doing those things. But I think we've been really experimenting with what does it look like to have a different leadership model than sort of a hero or a champion. That we've been kind of saying, what does it look like to partner, really collaborate, and hold a space for others to join.
So it sounds like you're sort of that process itself is one of the top priorities, as opposed to maybe some of your goals, or some of the initiatives you're undertaking. It's interesting. This morning I had a meeting with a student that often she and I have a little bit of difficulty. Our styles are different, and I'm very task oriented. Just okay, what have you done? And so I had the thought today. Perhaps this workshop had some influence, but I had the thought today. Well, maybe my first priority in this meeting should be, how she's doing. And, instead of, what have you gotten done? What's next? So, yeah, I guess I can see where that might be helpful to kind of change your priority a little bit. When I think about change initiatives, I've got things in my mind I want to see happen. And so, I'm just kind of task-oriented about it. Okay, what do we need to do? And I guess I could, just thinking about some of the people I work with on that, if I shifted some of the priority to just the process itself, and maybe trying to help make that process different than it typically is in our department. Maybe the outcome wouldn't be what I had in mind in the beginning, but maybe there'd still be some satisfaction in that.
When you said something like, you're task-oriented, and I think this is really common for engineers. I think that most people who aren't task-oriented don't survive the curriculum. So there's a way in which it's really a product of the enculturation into the field. And one of the questions that I have is, when your attention, not you, but when our attention is on the task, what gets unattended for? I know that was a terrible sentence, but what is left unattended, I guess?
Well, it seems like just going back to like Aristotle's model, you know, the task part of it is you know, just the materials and the processes, and so maybe the things that are really important to people aren't being attended to, you know, their goals and intentions.
It's also, I guess, in that another way that I'm going to answer this question sort of in a backwards way, is that when your attention is on the goals and for the sake of, it actually looks very inefficient. It looks like you're not doing tasks, and it looks like you're not producing stuff because you're just talking about it. And I think that that's been very hard for us to, I think it's been hard. It's been hard, like within my department, it's been hard because the orientation isn't the same with the people within my department as it is with the collaboration that I work with Linda on. And it looks like I'm often slowing things down and I'm inefficient. And as an industrial engineer, that's close to being a sin to be inefficient. So it is, you know, that it does look like that. But I think actually at least my idea is that what Linda said earlier is if you look at all that stuff at the beginning, then actually when you start executing stuff, it's much easier, much more life-giving. It's much more rewarding because you're just like, then you can speed through sometimes the things that you kind of have to do because you already know, sake of what am I doing it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's, I've been in some meetings where, well, as an example, you know, we want to do something different in a class or curriculum, and you know, people approach it from, okay, well, how many lectures is that going to be? What are we going to take out? And we're going to like slot that in, and then I'll try to back up, and I'll say, well, I don't think it's so much about what percent of the content this is going to be. You know, I think there's you know, ways to integrate some of these ideas with other things we're doing. You know, but I usually feel a little bit like I lack the right language, or you know, that we don't. Yeah, that there's not like a common language from which we can speak from, you know, and understand each other. So I'll struggle sometimes to like try to put what I'm thinking about in, you know, their paradigm, I guess, of, you know, how much time we spend on what. But yeah, it doesn't really fit, you know. So definitely I've run into those kinds of challenges where. Yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on efficiency and getting things done, and it, yeah, I don't know if it ends up kind of driving where we go, but it kind of messes things up a little bit.
I think, you know, like Liz said, inefficiency to engineers is pretty much a sin. You know, it's sort of a mental model is, well, why wouldn't you be efficient? You know, you're prioritizing, you know, time is money, And therefore, you're really trying to maximize the profit there. You're trying to ensure you're not wasting time. And I think this is all underneath our whole, sort of industrial era set of assumptions. Capitalize. We saw the word capitalize in the NSF. Think about STEM education, capitalize on diversity. And I think these sort of mental models are so deeply embedded in our habitual thinking that they seem true to us. And no one stops to question, well, what if you looked at the National Society of Professional Engineers ethics creed, it talks about the priority being the welfare of society. There's not really an efficiency term in there. And there's nothing really efficient about, for example, relationships or caring about somebody. So, this thing about you said with your student, thinking about, well, how is she doing? There's no efficiency measure in that. And yet, it seems like those things, like let's say somebody comes to the work, and they're crushed because their mother is dying or whatever. All of that stuff is really governing what happens, even if you try to ignore it. So, not you, I mean, even if one tries to ignore it. So it's interesting how we have this mental model of, well, if we focus on the task, then we will achieve success. But by ignoring those other things, it really undermines our success, really. And I'm curious, Michelle, did you actually talk to the student, and how did it go? What happened when you had the different conversations?
Yeah, it was, it was good. So, in my model, the ideal meeting with the student is, we exchange some ideas that we get excited about, and, kind of feed off each other, and, that's like my ideal. And that never happens with her. So I don't, so while, today was better, it's not like it's my ideal, it's, definitely it was preferable to kind of dwelling on what's been done or what hasn't been done or what to do next, or, definitely it was better. And, she was, I think, a little more comfortable, or, whatever. So, definitely it's better. But, I still want my ideal, but I'm trying to, learn things.
What's her ideal?
Well, yeah, that's a good, that would be a good thing to talk about. Yeah, what would her ideal be? Yeah. I don't know. Maybe no meeting. I'm not sure.
It is funny though how we don't notice that we even have an ideal,
Yeah.
or that somebody else would have one that is different than ours. I mean, maybe all the time these meetings are fantastic to her.
Right.
It's hard to know.
Right.
So maybe we should try to move on to the second step here. Let's see. Stop sharing this.
Designing using. You said it. You said it.
Okay, so one of the things we were thinking about with this is how essentially our assumptions, it may be in Aristotle's model, it may be kind of like the intent area, or it may be something about our goals. But like you say, these models don't map exactly to the iceberg. But these are some of the mental models that drive the things that we come up with. And we thought we would do this to kind of illustrate this by together designing a change process from some principle that we picked. And we hadn't picked out, but I was curious about something you said earlier in the conversation, which might be a principle that there has to be a leader. And I wonder, could we attempt to hold that as a assumption or a principle that change comes through a change champion or something like that, and then attempt to actually design something using that principle. Like, what would it look like if that was our baseline assumption? How would we then design a process? And you said that you're in a kind of change process. Is that right?
That we're in one?
Uh-huh.
There's just in a meeting last week that it reminded me of another change process we're trying to do. And yeah, I'm struggling with a little bit how it's going to go. But yeah, so we're in a couple of them.
Okay, and go ahead, Liz.
I was going to ask, Michelle, would it be possible to use one of those change processes as sort of as a case study to
that would be great.
Sure. Okay. Do you want to describe, maybe give us an overview of where you are, what you're doing, what's your plan, what is going on, sort of?
Okay, yeah. So sometime in the spring, ASME, so Mechanical Engineering Society, had this RFP for increasing diversity in mechanical engineering. So they partnered with WEPAN and I think NSF is providing funds, and what they're doing is they're having 3 workshops. So we went to one in the spring. So anyway, our department put in something, and so from the beginning, it's been, well, so definitely our chair, initiated. I was on sabbatical last year, and I saw the information about it, and I was, a little bit burned out on doing stuff like that, so I just kind of let it go. But then the chair picked up on it and said, hey, we should do this, and so one of the associate chairs and I kind of put the proposal together, and so we're trying to build on what we did with our new curriculum, and just the idea that, connecting theory and practice, some people have shown, or at least believe, that that's more attractive to underrepresented groups, and so, we talked about trying to kind of build on what we were doing in our curriculum, and trying to teach the classes in a different way, and that this would be more welcoming to underrepresented groups. And so it's evolved a little bit. And one of the other people that got involved was somebody who does some communications instruction in our department, and so she's done some things with training TAs to grade lab reports, and so her idea was to include training of TAs to kind of do better facilitation of teamwork and some of this kind of stuff. So in terms of, I would say, our department chair, and definitely the department chair, I suppose the goal is that there would be more women and minorities in our program. And so, by the way, there were, I think, 5 schools, maybe there might have been 20 that applied or something, and there were like 5 schools who were selected to go to these workshops. And kind of interesting range of goals. I mean, like Purdue, their goal is, just increase the numbers of students, underrepresented groups in mechanical engineering. They're coming into engineering at Purdue, but they're not going into mechanical engineering. So they're looking at very kind of brute force things like, how do we just get them into our department? So anyway, I was thinking about Aristotle's model and this project of increasing diversity in mechanical engineering, and for somebody like the department chair, it's just about the numbers. It's not really about changing the educational experience in any way. It's just about the numbers. And so as I was kind of reflecting on it, after I watched the videos, I guess I saw the numbers as maybe being, well, I'm not sure exactly what it would be, a goal or a symptom, or I'm not sure. But I tried to back up a little bit, like what's the intent? And, I guess the intent is that a lot of different students could find something that they could get excited about in mechanical engineering, in terms of what they might do with mechanical engineering, in terms of the way it's taught, and, that was kind of what I thought about in terms of like a higher level intent, because I still had kind of this lower level thing of, we need, faculty that are really excited about project-based learning, and, that was kind of my thing, but, it's not everybody's thing. So I guess maybe an intent we could agree on would be that, ME would be, a welcoming enough sort of culture that a lot of people from lots of different backgrounds, interests, whatever, could find something to be excited about in mechanical engineering. So we're trying to do some things in our new courses, perhaps do some things with faculty development that would have an impact on diversity in ME.
So I'm going to ask some stupid questions. So you said a couple things. One is that you observed that the stated goal of increasing numbers of women and underrepresented groups in mechanical engineering, you observed that is essentially in the lowest leverage of Aristotle's, or you might say Donella Meadows' hierarchy of leverage, systemic leverages. So the one that's on numbers doesn't really change anything. It's a little bit like chopping off the tip of the iceberg. It just reforms because of the systemic pressures and the structure that interacts with the environment and produces the tip again. So first of all, you recognize that, and then you talked about a possible intent that you could agree on is having a more welcoming culture. So my stupid question is, if you had a more welcoming culture, what would that get you?
Well, I guess it would get more students, and students who don't feel isolated, students who feel they belong in mechanical engineering, and maybe just more variety of students. I mean, Michigan Tech, there's a lot of gearheads for sure. There's definitely a lot of students in ME that are into snowmobiles and and fishing, or there's not a wide spectrum of student interests in mechanical engineering. I mean, it's oversimplifying a little bit, but there's a lot of students who are kind of similar to each other. So I guess if the culture was more welcoming, just a greater variety of student backgrounds and interests and goals.
Is it fair to say that what it would, you imagine what it would get if the culture is more welcoming, is it would result in ultimately this larger diversity of student cohorts if they felt that they're at home. That really, so you have that. What does that get you?
Well, I think as a faculty member, there would just be a little bit more fun. For example, and I don't know if it was going on when you were here, Linda, but we've got a Peace Corps master's program in mechanical engineering now, and so we get master's students who come to that from all over the country, and they're quite different, and they're fun to be around. I mean, not that somebody who likes fishing isn't fun to be around, but 1,000 people who like fishing, maybe isn't as fun. So so I think it's just fun to be around the students. And in terms of the students, I guess I think they would, it's hard, I don't know, it's hard to say. I know for myself in college, most of my friends weren't in engineering, and so that was, I really learned a ton from students that were studying lots of different things and had lots of different beliefs and lots of different interests, and so I think it'd be good for the learning for students to be around people that were different than them.
So it sounds like you're saying that at some level it would be life-giving, and at another level it's educational for everyone, for the student, for one another.
Yeah.
So neither of which these things have a numbers quality to them yet.
Right.
But it's interesting if you said to yourself, okay, our intent is to focus on having a life-giving culture that was profoundly educational, even at the level of like cultural exchange. It sounds like what you're talking about. That seems like an intent that would have a different set of decisions than, how can we get more people? Sorry, go ahead. More people who are not like us. I mean, it just, I'm just reflecting on the things that you're talking about. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It could be that, like, if that was the focus, who knows how it would turn out. Yeah, it could be a lot of people from other countries. It could be, people who like soccer instead of fishing, or yeah, it might not be about numbers of women or underrepresented groups. It could be that somehow we see that even the students we have are more different than we think, or we appreciate some of their other qualities, or besides their ability to fix a snowmobile, or whatever. So yeah, there could be a lot of different directions that might take us, and outcomes that could come about.
Yeah, I mean, it may be, for what you're saying is, then if you start with the student body you have now, one of the things that they talk about with culture is that the culture lives in the narrative of the organization. So in the stories that people tell. And I wonder, what are the stories that are being told right now about the mechanical engineering student body or mechanical engineering department? And kind of back to this whole notion of designing a change process from principles. One principle that you might have, if your principle was, you need a leader. And I'm just trying to, make a cartoon out of this, not really actually do it, but let's make a cartoon out of it. We say, okay, we need a leader. What would we do? And so far what you've said was you had a department chair, I think you said, that had an idea. And this idea was somehow informed by some other ideas, like somebody decided that if you connected practice and theory together more closely, it would be more compelling to a particular group of students. And that person was essentially trying to acquire that group of students or into the population. So just sort of the generic thing, if we just generalize it, is if your principle was, you need a leader, and you start to design it from that place, you might do things like you pick a leader, and you'd sort of ordain that person as the leader. You give them certain powers and certain privileges as the leader to implement change. And then you'd have followers. And you'd design a process where the leader was essentially out in front and being followed by others. I'm going to stop for.
And I also was thinking that you might also design it where you divide up areas. Sort of you compartmentalize, like, okay, you're going to be in charge of project-based learning. You lead that part of it. And you're going to be in charge of active learning in the classroom. You lead that part of it. So if there's I think sometimes in a leader, it looks a little bit like military organizations. There's someone, and then there's the org chart that sort of breaks up everything into compartments that people can kind of do on their own or in a contained way. It just seems like that would be another way if you have this idea as a leader. And if it's a big change process, you might do it that way.
Well, another model I have of a leader is kind of a facilitator or a shepherd, just, maybe, I still see the leaders being somewhat of a champion, but, trying to hear the inputs of others and kind of create some sense of shared purpose and make sure a couple meetings get scheduled and, kind of shepherds things along. So I guess I have that model in my mind too of the leader. Maybe not somebody who's going to force their will and seek followers, but, somebody who's facilitating and, I guess making sure that the group gets together and, works on something. And, so.
I think that maybe what Lynn and I were trying to do is almost exaggerate it, you know, that I think definitely your model of leadership is probably much more effective. But I think what we were trying to do is say, well, what if that was the principle, that you always need a leader to do things? What would be the consequences, or what would the change process look like if that was your principle? The principle you're talking about is more like, I mean, leadership by facilitation, which is another model. I mean, a similar model. But I think what I was trying to do is sort of exaggerate it. Not that we have we don't really have military organizations in the university most of the time.
But, you know, maybe we can, Liz, maybe we would switch and go to, let's say you have a servant leadership model, which just sounds more like your model of leadership, Michelle. So if the change required a leader, and the leader, on top of that, the model of leadership is servant leadership, then kind of how would you design it? And it sounds like what you're saying is, the kind of design you have in that situation is the servant leader would serve the larger group by calling together the body, to convene the body, to deliberate and make decisions together about what to do, how to change things. Now, that in that model of leadership, let's say there's a different model. Let's contrast it to a model of change happens through a set of organizational entrepreneurs rather than a single servant leader. If you kind of have these models next to each other, what do you see as the difference? How do you view them as being different? Am I making sense in this question? I'm just sort of trying to see how the mental model actually is causally linked to some of the outcomes of the servant leader. And by the way, the ultimate servant leader we have is, you know, Jesus. What we know about the servant leader is they get murdered on a cross.
Right. So you're asking about how would the consequences of those two models be different? Well, I guess I would think with the more military model, people might be less motivated to make changes, in more of a servant leadership or collaborative model. I think they might be more motivated to participate and make changes. You know, it's voluntary rather than coerced. I think it would take.
What if our tools of coercion were very effective, though? What if we used, you know, real punishment and reward? Could work.
Within the military model, like use punishment if right, to motivate.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that change model things would happen faster for sure. And I mean, probably for certain types of things, I think all of us would rather just blindly follow than have to think for ourselves. I mean, there's probably certain kinds of things where, you know, we just want to be led and, you know, not ask any questions. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I kind of in my mind, I just see, you know, people not being happy with the change and maybe looking for ways to undermine the change and, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's definitely nothing like coerced compliance to breed resentment and sabotage.
you know, there could be some things, you know, related to what Liz talked about earlier, where, you know, with more of a collaborative model, things happen more slowly. So I imagine you could lose momentum and inertia, and things can kind of die. And I've seen that happen in our department too, where there just gets to be fatigue after a while. You know, oh, we're still working on this.
But I want to ask about that. So, is momentum, which is essentially it's a force-based model. Is momentum required for change? When you use a collaborative model, what is the source of what you might call momentum? What is the source? Is it a finite source? Where did it come from?
Well, maybe, I guess hopefully some synergy amongst people involved.
Is it the fun?
You know, there's maybe individual excitement or whatever about seeing some of the things they want, and hopefully some synergy.
So you're saying the synergy, are you saying is it the life-giving part? Is it the fun? Is that where it comes from?
Yeah. Right. I suppose if you can see little, you know, successes, but perhaps what you're getting at is, you know, if the process itself is somewhat of a priority, that, you know, that could be life-giving.
Yeah, like I actually really like these conversations we're having right now, and we're not really getting anything done. So like or maybe we are, but you know, I think about that sometimes, like, really, could it just be that I'm enjoying collaborating? I'm enjoying the conversations. And then actually, surprisingly, when it seems to me when I'm enjoying things, after a time, I can look back and say, whoa, look at all that stuff we got done. That like I think we're doing that right now. I'm trying to write a report about a group that we've been meeting with. It's called Innovations in Engineering Education. We're talking about, can we do something on campus bigger than what we are doing individually? And we've been meeting for about a year, and it kind of seems like we're not getting anything done. But I think we actually are. When I look back, we actually have done some things, and that's really cool. You know, that our principle is that one of our main principles in that group is that we enjoy each other as a community. So anything we do has to honor that enjoyment, and it's really cool. We can do that. So I wonder sometimes.
Yeah, no, I can see the, you know, kind of the connection between that and other things. Yeah, like I like to golf, and, you know, one of the things the golf psychology books say is, you know, it can't all be about shooting the lowest scores. You know, it should be about learning, and it should be about enjoyment. And, you know, often if you focus on those things, your scores are pretty good too. But definitely that's challenging. Yeah, it's definitely a challenging thing. And there's times I kind of circumvent it with golf, where I'll think, okay, you know, today I'm really going to focus on fun, because I know that's the way to get the best score. So, but yeah, I think what you're saying is true, that usually the results end up being good if some of those other things are happening.
And then also kind of, if it's not good, then maybe we shouldn't be doing it. I mean, if the principles that we're working on are we're going to have fun enjoying each other and we're not getting anything done, well, okay, so we won't do anything. It's this concept of that the means need to reflect the end in which we're aiming, I think has just been, for the last 5 years we've been working together, I think that for me has been the biggest thing. Like, if we want to create a more welcoming environment, we need to be welcoming in the process. I mean, it's just so, well, yeah, duh, but it's hard to, sometimes it's easy to forget that, oh yeah, our process isn't welcoming. Uh-oh, we're fighting with each other. Wait a second. And that it's so easy to get disconnected from that, I find.
Yeah, I think with this project about diversity in ME, it's, there's like a timeline. There's going to be 3 workshops. It's going to last maybe a year and a half or something. And so and then every month there's a teleconference with like the other schools, and we have to write a little 1-page update, and so sometimes our focus is just on that, like, okay, what do we need to write up for the next meeting, and okay, yeah, what are we doing in the fall semester, and I mean, this all has to be done in a year, and there's so then we don't even talk about some of the larger issues, I guess.
Right, I think it is the case that where we might have a good intent, it gets displaced by material and process. How do we ensure that material and the things that we said we're going to do, we can check those boxes? One of the things we had hoped to do in this session is kind of illustrate how principles, the hidden principles for the most part, actually drive a change process. And we were going to do a cartoon of something like, an eye for an eye as a principle, or nice guys finish last. Pick something that was really, a caricature of something that you would have, and then design from that place. Because it's a little bit harder to see the fact that we actually are carrying around hidden principles that are propagating through our designs, our decisions. So even this thing that you're talking about with this workshop, clearly somebody had a principle that was, well, we must achieve these things. And we have finite amount of time together. So now we need to make sure we pack those into, when we get together, those are our priorities, achieving those things and managing the scarcity. And if you started with a really different principle, you'd really design the whole thing very differently. Like if your principle was genuinely, we want to create a culture that is welcoming to everyone, well, probably the first thing you need to do would be to talk to everyone and find out what is a welcoming culture. Not just what we imagine is a welcoming culture, not just, someone did a study and now I'm going to be, it's not really this way, I'm going to be kind of critical, but it's not really this way. Well, someone did a study and we take the results of that study and adopt it as an ideology and say, okay, this is the thing that we're going to do to help us achieve that other thing. You might actually instead work with what's actually live. Like, who are your students? Who are the students you want to have? And what to them is meaningful? How would we create that culture? So I'm just sort of contrasting kind of different ways that things might unfold if we're working from different principles.
Yeah, that makes
You
sense.
might also create a really a welcoming group within yourself that's diverse, right? That if you want to really look at the ways we do things as a diverse welcoming, as a sort of a practice place, what does it feel like? Like a reflective process for ourselves. Do we feel welcome? Do we feel welcome in all of our differences? And how is that? And how do we create it for ourselves as faculty to be able to include a complete diversity? Maybe include staff people or students. You know, how do we do that? And so that's sort of the radicalness of being the thing we want. That's super challenging.
I think it's a great idea. You know, the first workshop, for me anyway, there was a lot of discomfort just being there with my teammates, and you know, I don't know exactly why, but you know, there's a couple things for me in the background, but yeah, I think that would be important to, and there is some emphasis on that in the workshop. There's some consultants that have done a number of diversity projects, whatever, that, you know, they focus on that a little bit, building trust in the team. But I think that's a great thing, and I can see some ways to maybe think about this project as, you know, there's the one-year project, but, you know, maybe this can be the beginning of a longer-term thing that where we are able to build better relationships with faculty, amongst faculty, and you know, kind of see where that leads.
Just kind of looking at the time, and there's 5 more minutes. And I guess just for myself, I would feel a little bit bad if we didn't sort of have a little bit of closing if you're not coming back on Wednesday. And you said there's sort of a 50% chance. So I actually might even ask that, you know, we can do a little bit of closing now, or maybe even having a different conference call at some point to say, you know, it was great to have these conversations, and I don't know, there's something about that for me that I would like some kind of closing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you guys have any flexibility, like on, I mean, I'm sure there is some time on Wednesday that would work. I just don't know if it'll be at 3 Eastern time. So I don't know if you guys have any flexibility to, you know, shift the time, or so I could look at that a little more closely. And I guess what I could do is, I think in the next day I could send you an email, kind of how things look in terms of my time on Wednesday, and, you know, talk about shifting the time, or maybe the time will work. But yeah, I think it'd be great to try to talk again.
Yeah, actually, I think that would be good. The only thing I have to do is 2, and so, which is 5 your time, and or 4. I don't know. No, is it 5? 3 hours? Okay, good. So I'm free any time on Wednesday. So maybe an email would be good. I don't know about your availability.
Yeah, I can. I'm sorry. What I said was I can also be available earlier in the day on Wednesday, and I don't, you know, we published the times that we were going to hold these meetings, but I don't think anybody's going to join us, and so I don't think it's an issue for us to change the time, and we'd be happy to move it if you find it would be useful. And I also would just like to, I feel like we haven't exactly served you in your own, the questions you might be holding about your own change process. not that we could serve you, but we really, we would just be, thought partners or something in kind of more directly interacting with you in the things that the challenges that you're facing. That's just a bias of mine, but I realize that you have to offer that up.
Oh yeah. Well, no, you've given me a lot of good ideas. I mean, obviously you both think pretty deeply about this, and which is great. I mean, I think about these things not quite as deeply, but it's great to know that you're thinking about it and also trying things at your own school, and and that it has been worthwhile for you, and life-giving and so on to pursue some of these things. For me, after being an associate chair for 2 years, it's really when I started checking the retirement calculators. And, I'd kind of had it. So, no, I was on a sabbatical last year, so that was quite life-affirming too. But so anyway, it has been helpful to, know some of the things that are possible, I guess, and I think it has, helped me look at things in a little bit different way. Like I said, just coming in, my meeting with my student this morning, looking at it in a little bit different way, and some of the things we talked about, with this diversity project, also curriculum project. I think, there've been some things that'll be helpful for me.
So why don't we, you have our emails, don't you?
Sure, I have yours, Linda, because you sent out the kind of the notice about the course and the link to the course. So for sure I have that, and so yeah, I'll take a closer look at the itinerary, and hopefully by tomorrow I can give an idea of, sometime on Wednesday might work.
Great. Yeah, we'd be glad to move the time, and so we'll get a chance to do our final round and summary together, and look at what we've learned, if anything, and hopefully we'll see you at some point.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. I'll say that today was you guys asked difficult questions, so maybe maybe some answers will come to me, in the middle of the night or something. But definitely, it was challenging for me today, in a good way.
Good way. Okay, good. Okay. All right. Well, have a good rest of your day.
And yeah, hopefully, we'll see each other Wednesday. Okay. Bye.
Bye, Michelle.